Hi there guys, I hope you are having a good day. Now I have a question. What is going on with Andy Ruiz Jr.? Because he hasn't fought since Anthony Joshua. I know Joshua hasn't fought either, but Andy Ruiz needs a comeback fight and it was tentatively going to be Chris Arreola, and that was apparently agreed for late this year, but we haven't heard any advances on that. Now, I know the climate is different and it's not going to be easy to announce fights and get the money they need to pay these fighters, especially like Andy Ruiz Jr., who is now a household name, but still. What is going on? Is Andy Ruiz Jr. actually going to fight this year because he needs to? I mean, he's 30 years old in the prime of his career, so he needs to be active during this period. So the Chris Arreola fight is a good one for Andy Ruiz, but ultimately after that, he needs to start stepping back up again if he wants to get back in there with the likes of Anthony Joshua and Tyson Fury. So Ruiz Arreola, that was what was going to happen. That was Andy Ruiz Jr.'s comeback fight, although it has not been announced. There have been dates pushed around like late November or maybe even December or just late 2020. So we don't know what is going to happen with Andy Ruiz at the moment. We do know he has been training and staying into shape, which is great because that's something he hasn't really ever done. He doesn't always look aesthetically pleasing. But that's kind of the point. He's kind of deceiving. You don't really expect him to do the things he's going to be able to do in the ring, and he can. It's just incredible what he can do, the way he can move, and how fast he is. But ultimately, that's his biggest strength. So while he is cutting weight, I don't think that he needs to cut too much weight because, as I said, I think having that weight on him, yet still being fast, is extremely important for Andy Ruiz Jr. So that will serve him well going forward, and he seems to do better when he's weighing more than he does when he's lighter. So that weight for Ruiz seems to be a good thing. So is he going to come back this year? Is it going to be Chris Arreola? Well, we were guaranteed it would be, but we were not guaranteed a date. We were, of course, told it would be late this year, but still no date. I mean, that was a month ago we were told that it was going to be in the back end of 2020, yet still no date announced. So is Ruiz going to get out this year? I know things are difficult at the moment and it's going to have to be behind closed doors, but still, I mean, if he has to take less money and the money isn't there, do you want to stay active or do you want to be inactive? It's up to the fighter. Now, I do believe that Andy Ruiz wants to get back in there and fight, and it's not about the money for him, because if it was, he'd just walk away after the AJ fight because he has plenty of it. So ultimately, it's not about the money for Ruiz. What it's about is getting back in there and getting back to winning ways, and he can do that against Chris Arreola. This will be a good fight. Entertaining, not a barn burner, not incredible because obviously levels, but ultimately it's a good fight for Ruiz to come back in, and it is a winnable fight for Ruiz. Of course it is. They're not going to put him in there with a 50-50 after coming off a loss against AJ. So his comeback fight with a new trainer, Chris Arreola, that's a good fight. We just need a date, venue, and I mean, we just want to know when it is. We want to know if Andy Ruiz is actually going to fight this year because he does need to. He cannot spend a year or more of his career being inactive. I mean, Anthony Joshua hasn't fought since the Ruiz fight either, and he's going to fight likely on December 12th, and that will be a year out of the ring for Anthony Joshua. How long is it going to be before Andy Ruiz fights again? And this seems to be kind of a notorious thing with PBC fighters. They fight once or twice a year, which is not enough. Many fighters can box 3-4 times a year. Look back 10-20 years ago, they would fight 3 or 4 times a year, even the champions at the top level. Yet these days, they don't seem to fight as often as they used to. I know there's probably more money about now and maybe they don't need the amount of fights, but ultimately it's great to see a fighter get in there with 3 or 4 different opponents in a year, because if you think that they have mandatories or whatever to deal with, they can get them done, sorted and out of the way, then go on to fighting voluntaries in the fights they want to be in. And what is important for Ruiz during this point is to be active. He needs to be fighting 2, 3, 4, maybe 5 times a year, especially considering he's coming back against Arreola, which is a lower level opposition. He's not at world level in this fight. So have a couple of fights, get back in there. And ultimately he has a new trainer, Eddie Reynoso. So get the timing, get the rhythm, sort out a system with the new trainer. It's important to have maybe 1-2 camps with a new trainer anyway before you get back in there with a top opponent. I mean, he doesn't want a world title fight next with his new trainer. I'm sure he would take it because obviously he took the AJ fight at short notice. But a new trainer, new system, and a different training camp with a different trainer. He needs to have 1 or 2 of those to really get into the rhythm and find out a system with this new trainer, Eddie Reynoso. And I'm sure that Andy Ruiz Jr. will be fine with his new trainer. Now, one thing about Ruiz, he has fast hands but slow feet. One thing about Canelo, fast hands but slower feet. But what was important with Canelo is his positioning. That was one thing that Eddie Reynoso really done well with Canelo. Obviously, Canelo's involved as well. He's the one doing it. But ultimately, that is one thing that Canelo needed to really improve upon. You saw it in the Floyd Mayweather fight. His hands were fast, but his feet were slow. And Floyd Mayweather, fast hands, fast feet. And ultimately that allowed Floyd Mayweather to judge the distance, tempo and everything in the fight and control Canelo. But Canelo needed to have faster feet as well as fast hands. But you cannot just have fast feet. It's one thing that you're kind of born with. But one thing you can do to speed your feet up is have a good positioning. So that is what Canelo has done. He's improved his positioning. He's never in a position where his feet cross or his feet come square. That is very important in boxing. So that gives the illusion that his feet are faster than they actually are. That is what Canelo has learned under Eddie Reynoso, and that is what Andy Ruiz Jr. needs to learn also. Have faster feet and better movement to go with the hand speed, and that comes down to positioning if you do not naturally have fast feet. One thing that Canelo has learned over his boxing career. And that is something that Andy Ruiz Jr. can also benefit from learning, and I'm sure he will under Eddie Reynoso, because he's in a camp full of world champions, full of world-class fighters. I mean, he's got Canelo there training right beside him as well, often. So Andy Ruiz Jr. will do all right under the guidance of Eddie Reynoso, and he will learn certain things about his footwork, his positioning, to make his feet faster. And I mean, it's about not wasting movements, not letting your legs cross, and making sure you have your positioning right to take a punch or to land a punch, go on the back foot or go forward. And your footwork and balance ultimately plays a big part in that. So if he can sort that out, his feet won't necessarily get faster. Well, they will if he drops a little bit of weight, but ultimately his feet won't get lightning fast. But his positioning, his balance will definitely help speed his feet up to match his hand speed. So guys, anyway, what are your thoughts on this? It seems like Andy Ruiz Jr. is going to get back into the ring this year. No date, no venue, nothing announced just yet. But we are told he will get back into the ring in 2020. It's just when and where it happens. Hopefully it does, because he does not want to be inactive during this period of his career. Not just because of his fighting, but because he has become a household name. So it's important that he maintains that and remains relevant. So guys, anyway, what are your thoughts on this? Make sure you leave your thoughts in the comments below, leave a thumbs up and subscribe if you are new. Thanks guys.